Remember that one really annoying kid in elementary school who, when Halloween came around and someone dressed up as Frankenstein, always had to point out that they were actually dressed up as Frankenstein's monster just to prove that they were smarter than anyone else? Yeah, that was me. Okay, today we are going to be reviewing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which she wrote when she was 18 years old. What were you doing when you were 18 years old? I was not redefining a literary genre. I was in my dorm room doing my homework and wasting my life. Most of us, when we think of Frankenstein, we think of the mad scientist who created this 8-foot-tall monster that's really dumb and really slow and goes off and kills a whole bunch of people. And while that is definitely in the original story, it is not, the book is a lot deeper than that. Also, the character of Igor does not exist in the original story. He did not come into play until the Frankenstein movie series in 1931. Hey, Miss Igor. Like I said, Victor Frankenstein is the doctor. He's not the monster. He is a monster, but we'll get to that later. The book starts with letters between a Captain Robert Walton and his sister who lives in England. And Captain Walton is in the Arctic Circle trying to find the North Pole and everything that goes along with that, all the fame and the fortune and the glory. And one day his crew pull a man out of the ice, and this guy's all by himself, and he ends up being Victor Frankenstein. And the book actually starts, or the main story starts, when Frankenstein starts telling how he ended up being in the middle of the Arctic by himself. So Victor Frankenstein is from a well-off, very happy family, loving, and they live in Geneva. And he's going away to medical school, but right before he leaves, his mom dies. And so he has to go away to school and leave everything behind, but he's full of grief. Now, Frankenstein is incredibly intelligent. Like, his professors are jealous of how intelligent he is and the talent that he possesses. But before Frankenstein left home, he had been really interested in alchemy and the pseudosciences of the time. And so he decides that he's going to find the elixir of life. And he's going to end human suffering. And he ends up doing it. He creates his monster from all these different pieces of dead bodies. He creates new life. But as soon as the spark of life touches this creation, he realizes that, maybe things that are dead are supposed to stay dead. And within a couple hours, he loses his monster and he has a mental breakdown. And his friend Clerval comes to take care of him, but he doesn't tell Clerval what brought all of this on. And it takes a long time for him to get better. But once he's better, he decides that he's going to go home. But right before he arrives home, his baby brother is killed. And the number one murder suspect is his brother's nanny, a woman who's been living with the family since she was very young. And Frankenstein knows that the nanny didn't do it. He knows that this creature that he hasn't seen for so long is the actual culprit. And he doesn't know how to say anything like that. Because he doesn't speak up, the nanny is eventually executed because they have nobody else to pin it on. And so this is kind of where the book starts to lose me, because yes, it's the beginning of the 1800s. And yeah, if you were to blame a murder today on an 8-foot reanimated corpse, people aren't going to believe you. People are probably going to think there's something deeply, deeply wrong with you and you need meds. But I can't help but think that maybe if he had said something, that would have been enough to stay in execution. So the entire Frankenstein family is in mourning, and Frankenstein leaves and goes on a camping trip, trying to just get his head straight with everything that's going on. And when he's in the mountains and he runs into the creature, and lo and behold, that creature isn't really happy with him. The creature, despite what Hollywood portrays him as, is actually very intelligent and very articulate and speaks in a very poetic and emotional way that makes the reader start to understand that where he's coming from is a legitimate standpoint, because he knows that he's an abomination. He knows that he's ugly. He knows that he's not supposed to exist. But he has nowhere to go because Frankenstein's rejected him. So he makes a deal with Frankenstein, and he says, if you will give me a companion, I will leave you alone. I will never hurt anyone else again. Just make me a friend. So initially Frankenstein agrees to this, and he says, okay. He goes off to the Orkney Islands. He starts creating a female creature. But partway through, he starts to get cold feet because he starts worrying, well, what if this female is more evil than the male? What if this What if they don't get along? Or even worse, what if they have monster babies? Dude, you're making this creature. Just don't put a uterus in it, okay? Problem solved. But Frankenstein doesn't see that, so he destroys his creation and he goes home. And once he lands in England, he finds out that Clerval has been killed and that he is the number one suspect. He is arrested and he has another breakdown while he's in jail. He's eventually acquitted and he goes home and he decides that he's going to marry his sweetheart. But he runs into the monster again, and the monster makes it very clear that as long as Frankenstein is alive, he will never be free of this monster. The monster says that I will be with you on your wedding night. And so on his wedding night, instead of thinking about things that most of us are thinking about, he arms himself up, he leaves his wife in the room, he locks the door, says, I will be back, and he goes to find the monster. But the monster makes it into the room, and he kills his wife. And at this point, Frankenstein has had enough. And he decides that whatever it's going to take, he is going to get rid of his monster once and for all. And so that's how he ends up in the Arctic, is that he's been following his monster all the way up into the Arctic. And Frankenstein eventually dies on the ship. Before he dies, he gives the captain some choice words that, you know, it's okay to live an ordinary life. You don't need the acclaim and the fame and the honor and all of those things that he himself had been chasing, because it just ended up bringing him misery. And after Frankenstein dies, the monster comes on board and he mourns Frankenstein, because Frankenstein was the only link he had to society. And he now realizes that he's on his own. And so he tells Captain Walton and the rest of his crew that he is going to go away and that he's going to kill himself. And he goes off into the ice and nobody ever hears from him again. Full disclosure, this is my husband's absolute favorite book in the entire world. He would read it again and again. He thinks it's great. I don't like it that much, and I kind of feel like I'm going to get struck down for saying that, but I don't like it. Frankenstein, while it defined the horror genre, is not what we would think of as a regular monster story. Yes, there is the monster. Yes, there is suspense and terror, but it's more about the thoughts and the feelings and the grief and the regret and the shame that goes along with doing something that you weren't supposed to do. And everybody feels that. You know, I have never reanimated a dead corpse, but I've done some things I'm not particularly proud of. You know, go look at the 4 years I spent in high school. But the monster just wanted to be loved. And Frankenstein is so worried that he has created something that is evil and an abomination that he completely abandons it. And by doing so, he creates what he is so afraid of. The monster just wants to be accepted. He just wants happiness. He just wants to belong. And as a sentient being, he has a right to that. And Frankenstein rejecting him turns him into the killing machine that he becomes. And that's why this book is so famous, why it has endured for 200 years. It's not about the monster. It's not about the terror and the suspense. That is definitely part of it, but it has more to do with the human condition of talking about things that we can all understand and all accept. And even though none of us are going to be terrorized by an 8-foot reanimated corpse, we can understand where the characters in the story are coming from. And it is a beautiful story, and it is written in the 19th century prose, and it's very beautiful, very poetic. It does have a couple problems. This was Mary Shelley's first book, and so there are a few times where a character kind of just suddenly appears when they should have been introduced several chapters back. But because what she wrote about was so epic and so endearing and so real, it's really easy to look past those things, and the technical problems with her writing are not why I don't like it. I just don't like listening to page after page of Victor Frankenstein lamenting, because in my opinion, he could solve the problem. If he just stepped up and became a dad, None of this would have happened if he just gave his monster a hug, gave it some love, gave it a name. Goodness sakes, though he spends the entire novel calling it the Fiend. He doesn't even bother to call it Bob. The book would be different, and I just get frustrated by his lack of initiative to solve the problem until everybody in his life is dead. But I don't want to make it seem like it's a bad book, because it's not. Husband's favorite book. And it's definitely worth a read to realize how this book shapes what we think of horror today, because it still does. But Victor Frankenstein is still a ninny. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please press the like button. And if you want to see more content, feel free to subscribe. If you have any books that you would like me to review, please leave a comment down below, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.